Sorry, just setting up. New part of library. I mean, I know I should have done this before. I know I should. This table's heavier than it looks. Okay. In my chair. This is a bit like. There we go. Oh. Hello, everybody. This is Brandy Rose Smith, live from the Forbidden Library. How do you like my new background? Isn't it cool? This is a weird part of the library. If you do step on that bottom bit, you know, that's the platform bit in the middle. You do step on that bottom bit. You are actually upside down. Like, my hair goes up with gravity, but I am not. It's weird. It's pretty weird. Library is fantastical and mind-boggling, and it hurts my brain. I'd like to see the links for the artist are down in the description, because I think they did a very good job. Oh, they did a great job. They were really quick, and yeah, I hope you like it. But we shall do it justice by doing some reading in it. And we all should know today's book. Let's get my other things set up. This is where's all my stuff? On, we need that. We need that. We need this. This is very important. This is very important. But that. Yeah, tiny bit of stuff. Has the table ended up in front of everything? Has it? Have I messed everything up? Have I messed up my scene? Didn't have. No, that's wrong. No, definitely don't want that one. Apologies. I know how to do things. I know how to stream. Currently red. We need that as well. Why is that like that? Why is that covered? There we go. There we go. Where's my book? Why is that not loading? Yeah, it's right. That's the book image. That's the book image. Use it. Use it. I don't. My book image has gone walkabout. Has it been stolen by the rest of this blooming library? Did it? Oh, it must have found its home. Okay, we're gonna have to do a bit of rearranging. That book image just does not want to appear. Oh well. This is where we are. This is what's going on. We still have enough room for everything, so that's fine. My book image just gone back to its home. Found its it must have found its family in this new area. I'm gonna have to go find another one. That's it. That's everything we need. Vindaba. Shall we get on with the book then? We are reading Purple Door District once more. And we are only 14% of the way through this book. So here is a 14% recap. So, we started with Bianca, a very scared werebird who is being hunted by hunters. People who hunt parahumans. Parahumans are people who are just, you know, people but not human. Werebirds and werewolves and vampires and all that good stuff. She's very scared of these hunters. They killed her sister. She's very sad about it. And then she ran away. And her sister always told her about this place called the Purple Door District, which apparently helps shelter parahumans. So she was running away. She got a taxi, and apparently the guy was a hunter and was going to hand her over. So she got out of the taxi, and she actually Googled Purple Door District and found a B&B close by that had a purple door with the purple flowers, which is apparently a way to, like, identify. That's the word I'm looking for. Identify a Purple Door District. So she ran there, and she was getting attacked, and she got shot with henbane, which is like wolf's bane for burbs. And it hurt her, but she got to the door, and it was opened by a badass lady called Gladys. Not GLaDOS, Gladys, who is a epic lady. She's a mage, and she used all the water and the rain to chase off the hunters and took Bianca in. And Bianca's got a bit of trust issues, especially when Gladys mentioned something called Legion, which is apparently responsible for keeping the peace, basically, between parahumans and hunters. And then she helped Bianca. She nursed Bianca back to a bit more health, and then went out. And then we got a character switch to a guy called Carlos, who is also a wereburb. He owns a place called the Guacamole Grill, and was having some issues with a vampire who's getting a bit too big for her boots. She had a few werewolves where they were causing trouble, so he kicked the werewolves out, and then helped the blood bag she had at the time, this poor human who was just basically kidnapped on the way home from work. Helped him get back on his feet. Gladys appeared as well and helped sort of diffuse all the tension, because she's the big badass of the town. She is the Violet Warden? Violet Warden, is that it? BM? No, Marshall, not Warden. Marshall. Violet Marshall. She's the big boss. Everyone is afraid of her. So, then she asks Carlos if he'll be able to take another one into his cloister, into his little family. Because she's looking for somewhere Bianca can stay. Because burbs need to be with burbs. Because burbs are very affectionate and need a lot of... They can physically die from loneliness, apparently. So, that's about where we finished it. Carlos had gone on his way home. He'd seen a bit of a shadow, so he thinks maybe that vampire's a bit salty about what happened. I think that's a good enough summary. And that's an incredibly long summary for 14%. I am a little bit afraid of when I need to do a bigger summary. Luckily, like I said, we only have permission for 50% of this book. So if you do find it interesting, get your butt into my description. Click a button to take you to Amazon to go buy it. Hashtag not an ad, but hashtag a cool book, and you should try it. Let's go. Chapter 4. Cloister. We go in from Carlos again. Carlos started the car and turned the radio on. Pop music blasted through his speakers and assaulted his sensitive hearing. He scrambled to turn the volume... Why did he have the volume down? Why did he have the volume? He scrambled to turn the volume down. Apparently, Anita used his car on her break again. Ah, I see. The children. They turned it up. I believe Anita was his niece. What was it with kids and turning up music? What was it with kids? Turning the music up so it blew out your eardrums. Oh, the youth. Muttering, he changed the channel to blissful classic rock and pulled out of the parking lot. Traffic in Chicago moved like a funeral procession, with a rush hour that could last from 3 p.m. anywhere up to 8 p.m. Oh, Jesus. Bad. Depending on where you were. The shortcuts worked well, when not everyone knew to take them. And, mother forbid, construction didn't cover a road with shitty material. That would have replaced it again the next summer. Ah, yeah. That's stuff where they just kind of fill in a few plot holes and then they always have to do it the next day. He reached into his console and pulled out a packet of cigarettes, which cost him a small fortune these days. Lighting one, he drew in a deep lungful of smoke. The smell of tobacco helped his muscles and nerves relax after the episode with Trish. Haley hated when he smoked, so he only did it on the rare occasion when he drove from home to the restaurant after he had a hard day. Give me a second, because you can see my mouse, and I know that might not bother some people, but obviously I'm using it to kind of keep my place sometimes, and sometimes I don't. So I'm gonna see if I can... Oh, it doesn't. I can't help but think that would be annoying. Capture code off. No? No! Okay, cool. I feel like, if I did that all the time, I don't think it would be too much of an issue, but I feel like... Feel free to comment if you preferred it that way. Tell me about it. Let me improve with your feedback. Anyway. It helped keep him calm, especially with so many assholes on the road. And vampires lurking in the shadows. A cool breeze wafted through his car, stirring a medallion hanging from his rearview mirror. It displayed the likeness of Saint Gull, the patron saint of birds. Gull as in gull. He's a gull, I imagine. The holy man stood with a bear and a log of wood at his feet, while a bird flew above his head. Carlos wore a similar medallion around his neck, a gift from his wife. It kept him safe, he believed, and it had helped him survive a car crash a few years ago. It comforted him to have something to believe in, especially when the world could be so dark and unforgiving. You know what I like about this book? A kind of nice showing of religion, I guess. Religion gets shit on a lot. It's really easy to use religion as an excuse in books to like justify someone's crazy actions. It's kind of nice just to have people just be religiously chill, you know, like a lot of people are. Carlos tapped his cigarettes on the side of the window and glanced at the passengers in the car next to him. They bobbed their heads to heavy bass music that rattled his bones, both smelling of human. One kid noticed him watching and gave him the finger before the car zoomed ahead. Ugh! Youths! Carlos grunts. Humans. Hummus. The few who knew about his kind anyway rarely gave parahumans a chance. They just gave in to fear and hunted the animals down or ran in the other direction. Carlos preferred the runners. The others invariably turned into hunters. Hunters were the worst. Carlos didn't fault the people needing a job, nor did he snub those who tried to keep a community safe. There were some good hunters, those who took out the real psychopaths, but some were even friends with the PDD, the Purple Door District. But there were just as many hunters who craved murdering parahumans for the sheer thrill. Carlos had lost an innocent cloister bird to hunters before. Said hunter would never taken. We have seen that Carlos is a wee bit of a badass, so that poor guy. Carlos didn't think of himself as a murderer, a necessary evil for justice, which was hypocritical since the hunters thought the same things of themselves. But really, what good person shot a daughter to death right in front of her mother? Damn. Carlos puffed smoke again and tapped more ashes to the wind. He rubbed his temples with his index finger, his eyes drifting to a picture tucked behind the steering wheel. A young woman with skin the same shade as his. A determined smile stood beside him. And a shorter brunette woman wearing glasses. Andrea. He could almost hear his little girl's laugh, though it had been silenced 10 years ago with the snarl of a gun. Like the snarl of a gun. It's good. The actual thing isn't good, obviously, but the words, they are good. 10 years, but the pain stayed fresh. While Haley had drowned herself in tears, Carlos had dealt with his grief by seeking revenge. Nothing had helped. Of course. Not until 2 new chicks came into their lives through adoption. Came into their nest. Most cloisters consisted just of the immediate or extended family, but Carlos had never been one for tradition. His cloister homed many adopted folks, and he wouldn't have it any other way. Neither would Haley. She liked big families and feeding huge crowds. Oh, I like someone who can cook for huge crowds. Get that big pot out. Do big things. Because then, even if you're just cooking for yourself, you can freeze a lot of it. Oh my god, is that so... Me getting excited about this make me feel old. Oh, what's happened? What's happened to my model? 1 second. Wake up, model. Wake up. I'm too excited about food. 1 second. Might have to do a little... I'm back. Sorry, I got really excited about food. I like food. We're fine. We're back. Anyway, I did Would you like to be family feeding huge rats? And she feeds them so good that my model breaks. Or, at least, she had, up until Andrea's murder. Now she unsheathed her talons to anyone who got close. Too close to their cloister, lest they bring trouble. It made welcoming Bianca into the fold that much more difficult. Perhaps if hunters weren't trailing the girl, his wife would be more understanding. But their family had seen enough trouble to last a lifetime. Would he be able to convince her to give Bianca a chance? Someone honked, startling him from his thoughts. He glanced up and realized he'd been sitting at a green light. Oh, I do that a lot. Carlos waved his hand in apology and continued down the road. A few more turns, and he parked on the street in front of a huge forest green townhouse he and part of his cloister inhabited. He kept searching for an apartment building with enough complexes that they could all live together, but the other part of his cloister resided only a couple streets away. He locked the car and headed inside. The delicious scent of brisket and masa taco shells tickling his nose. Making Tex-Mex food at the guacamole grill was delicious and comforting in its blending of cultures, but it wasn't the same as the meals with his family in Mexico. Haley had decided to learn the traditional dishes so he could have a little taste of home away from, well, home. He unlocked the door and started up to the 2nd floor, where his immediate family lived. Anita and her girlfriend took the downstairs. Both were still busy at work. He opened the door and the pitter-patter of tiny feet greeted him. "Papa!" Madison shouted as she rushed towards him. Henry ran after her, his curly red hair bouncing on his head. "Hi, chicks!" Carlos shouted and knelt, taking both children into his arms. Because chick is used as a word for, obviously, ladies in a bad way. And it makes sense for him to call them chicks because they're all birds. It still comes across a little bit weird. A little bit weird. I know it's not meant like that, but I can't help but make the connections in my brain sometimes. He hugged them tightly and showered them with kisses. Madison wrapped her arms around him and kissed him back, her white cheeks flushed from running and laughing. Her brother, his nose speckled with freckles, grinned, showing an empty spot in his mouth. "Ah! Did Mama help you get the tooth out?" "Nope," Henry said. "Madison hit me in the mouth with a plastic bat." Henry! You weren't supposed to tell him that," Madison grumbled. Carlos gave his daughter a look. A plastic bat. We were playing ball, Madison said. I tried to hit the ball, but his mouth got in the way. Oh, kids are great. Carlos snorted with laughter and ruffled his son's hair. Better put that under the pillow for the tooth fairy. I will, Papa, Henry said back to give his father room. But Madison continued to cling. Carlos didn't mind. He swept the 7-year-old up in his arms and walked into the kitchen with her still sitting on his hip. Henry followed behind. Carlos loved his babies. Since the first day he and Haley had adopted them, they had been the apples of his eye. Madison had practically called the orphanage her birthplace. Kids had poked fun at her whenever she talked about the bird in her head. None of them had realized she was an avian until Carlos found her at the age of 4. By then, she'd been so afraid to talk about her bird that it had taken a month for him to coax it out of her. The good thing about being an elder avian was that he'd sensed a little dove in her mind bouncing around, wanting to be out in the world. Henry had ended up in the foster system after his mother overdosed. His father, a sick, twisted man, took his grief out on Henry. No, poor baby. Child Services had stepped in, a parahuman one this time. Carlos had received the call not long after. Henry was brought into the system. They knew his reputation as a father and how strong he kept his cloister. Best to have birds stay with birds, they believed. Gladys believes the same thing. Seems to be working so far. At least some foster systems weren't a total wreck. Mama! Henry said, rushing into his mother's side. He put his hands on her wheelchair arm and bared his mouth to her. I showed Dad the hole. I heard, Haley said with a laugh. She kissed his head and continued picking apart the brisket. You're a bit late, she said and tilted her head back. A beautiful brown... Sorry. I think I itched my nose. And that's what caused it. Again, or it might be that I'm excited about food. Brisket sounds lovely. I do a brisket plan for next week in my meal plan. But it probably won't be as tasty as this. She said and tilted her head back, her beautiful brown eyes shining behind her glasses. She has glasses too. Are you hungry? Always famished for your cooking, he said. He leaned down and kissed her deeply. Dude. Ew, Madison complained. Yuck. Henry agreed. Yeah, gross. What's this kiss? Adults consensually kissing? Gross. Carlos arched an eyebrow at them. You don't like it, he said, setting Madison down. Then you two can go set the table. Go on, get. He teased, nudging his daughter towards his son. But Dad... Madison cried. Carlos folded his arm, looking at them with mock sternness. Don't make me send my bird after you. The two children feigned terror. Henry bravely stood up to his father, hands on his hips. I'm not afraid. Carlos smirked. A challenge, eh? He opened his mind, reached for the apparition of his roosting bird. The mighty golden eagle opened his eyes and stretched out his wings, his feathers glinting hints of gold. Carlos both felt and saw a few feathers slip free from today's undue stress. Oh. Haley would need to give him a good preening tonight to get over Trish. His golden eagle slipped out of his mind and went to Madison first, flapping playfully at her pretty ring-necked dove. Avians shared a psychic bond through their birds. Just as vampires could push charm on a human's mind, he could push his bird into his children, and would in turn see their little avian flapping about. Madison laughed at the same time. The bird in her mind cooed and then took off, cackling. Carlos then sent his bird into his son next and found Henry's puffy red-tailed hawk fluffing himself to look larger. Aww. Carlos's eagle screeched and nipped at the red-tailed hawk. The two children ran, laughing, Carlos's eagle still soaring through their minds. He turned back to his wife and draped his arms around her shoulders. "How are you?" he asked. He nuzzled his face into her delicate head. "Doing fine," she said, and leaned her head back to kiss him. "Kids kept me busy today. I took them to the park and let them fly. Flew with them a bit." Carlos frowned. "How was your landing?" She shrugged and glanced at her legs. Rough. But I managed it. I'll have a couple of scrapes, but it was worth it to fly with them." He nodded and stroked her hair. The hunters hadn't just taken their baby girl with them. They lamed his wife as well. Haley made the best of it and managed to get around. Adjusting to shifting became harder for her. Her bird no longer had mobility of her legs, just as the human side didn't have the ability to walk. She flew, but her landing could rival the clumsiest of fledglings. Again, another thing I like about this book, we have a disabled character who doesn't magically get cured of being disabled because they're magical. They could, Erin could have easily written this in a way that but when she's a bird, she's not disabled. But no, it's still there. It's still there, and she's thriving, it's fine. It's fine. It's terrible what happened. But she's living. I think that's wonderful. Haley braved her disability and learned to make things easier for herself. They'd had an elevator installed in the house so that she could get in and out. The city had plenty of transportation, and where the bus couldn't take her, one of his avians usually could. At least the kids kept her happy. Haley handed him a bowl of brisket, and set a plate of masa shells on her lap. "Let's eat it before it gets cold." They headed out into the dining room, surrounded with pictures of his beloved family. Marks on the walls told the story of Henry and Madison's growth over the years. A mural painted with his kids. Handprints displayed of his family's feathers. Handprints displayed all of his family's feathers, and Andrea's barn owl tail feather occupying the center. Oh. To his surprise, Madison and Henry actually had set the table up for them, for once in their lives. Carlos sat down and helped his wife serve the food. They said grace to the Great Mother together, then started to eat. It's interesting that the bird religion is so close to Christianity. Sorry, small stretch. Small stretch. Madison and Henry devoured the food and played with the scraps, building little models on their plates. Carlos didn't mind. He liked when they were creative. He glanced at his wife as she sipped hot tea. Oh, I want tea. I don't have tea. But I'm not going to take a break to make it. She still looked so young and beautiful, barely a stress line on her face, despite being nearly 70 years of age. Avians, like all parahumans, aged slower and kept their youthful faces and figures much longer. Ugh. Don't roll it in. Carlos himself was nearing 110! What a cradle snatcher! He finally had greys showing in his hair, and a moustache Though even that would be considered early onset greys. Most parahumans could have lived to be about 200 years of age. Fate decided for them after that. He drank a beer and tapped on the top of the table. Gladys came to visit me today. Gladys came to visit me today. I told you, I'm still going to make the slip. I know it's bad, but I'm going to make that slip a lot. Oh, it was funny. I did the TikTok about that. And when you do a TikTok, it can like auto do the subtitles for you. And every time I said Gladys, it still thought I was saying Gladys the entire time. So obviously, even when I say Gladys, it probably sounds like Gladys. You're probably not even going to be able to tell the difference. Maybe in an American accent you'd be able to tell, but I don't think I could do an American accent. So you're just going to have to live with me and my Gladuses. Gladys. Just showed up again. Haley guessed. Carlos chuckled. Yes, Annie, you should have seen the look on her face when Gladys chased her out. He shook his head. But that's not why she came. She found another avian she wants to bring to us. Kid was being tracked by hunters. Haley paused with her mug to her lips. You want to bring her here? Someone who still has hunters on their tail. He flushed and glanced at her children. We have a cloister to think. I know. But she's got nowhere to go. Besides, could use some help around the house, especially with these two wild chicks pecking at your heels. He frowned. Gladys is taking care of the hunter issue. The kid needs help getting back on her feet. You know, the avian way. Haley set her mug down, eyes diverted. I don't know if I can. Close. Andrea? You took in two beautiful children, Carla said, gesturing to the pair. They'd stopped playing to listen. Haley gave him a look. They weren't being hunted. We're finally stable. Happy! I don't want to risk ruining that. Carla sighed. We have a duty to the avians of the town. As father, no! You have a duty, Haley snapped. That doesn't mean you have to get your children involved. I won't let the hunters come down on us again. Carlos heard a fork clank on the hardwood floor and glanced at Henry and Madison. They stared back, their faces twisted with surprise and worry. His eyes softened. They'd mostly finished their meals by now. Hey, fledglings. Can you bring your plates to the kitchen and then play a little in your room? Mama and I need to talk. I think we're done talking, Haley retorted. She put her plate on her lap and wheeled into the kitchen. He wasn't surprised by her reaction, but couldn't hide his disappointment. Carlos had at least gotten his revenge against Andrea's murderer, but Haley and her bird were still in turmoil. The trauma from her injury made it impossible for her to have children again. Adoption was the only course they could take. Not that either of them minded. They loved Henry and Madison as much as Andrea, but there was still a loss for both him and Henry. A chair squeaked against the wooden floor. Henry hopped down and went to his father's side, reaching for his hand. The new bird is trouble? He asked, and Carlos nodded. Henry set his jaw. Then Then shouldn't we help her? You and Mama are strong, and we have a big cloister. We can be her new family, like you and Mama were from my new family. Oh, good babies. Yeah, Madison agreed. It'd be cool to have another sibling, especially a sister. She grinned and looked at Henry. We could teach her all our games. Carlos smiled at his innocent little children. She might be a bit too old for those. No one is too old to play, Henry said with conviction. Maddie and I were in trouble too, but you and Mama rescued us. Carlos bit his lip. That was, different. Madison shook her head. We needed a home, and we got one now. She needs a home. Carlos sighed to himself. At least someone else agreed with him. He had to meet the girl before he decided. But he wouldn't bring her in without Haley's consent. It wouldn't be healthy for anyone. Thank you, Chip, Carlos said, and pulled his children close. You're both very brave. They hugged him back, then grabbed their plates and his, and brought them to the kitchen. Carlos carried the rest of the dishes, and noticed Haley wasn't there. He didn't run after her. He needed a moment. He worked with his kids to get the dishes cleaned and put away, then wrapped up the food. For the time being, he didn't grab the tres leches cake. Sounds nice. I'm gonna say tres leches cake. I'm gonna tell you about it. We're gonna learn some things today. Are you ready? Let's, Wikipedia, tell me the things. Oh, it looks tasty. Here you go. Here you go. Here's a Wikipedia page about it. It's a Spanish cake known as pan tres leches. It is a sponge cake soaked in 3 kinds of milk. Oh, that probably makes it really, really moist. Sorry if you don't know. But it has a soggy consistency. It is a distinct texture. Why it does not have a soggy consistency despite being soaked in a mixture of 3 milks. We have learned a thing today about a Spanish cake. Fascinating. We continue. Instead, he sent his children off to their room to play, then headed for the balcony. Haley's chair sat empty outside. Instead, he found a beautiful barn owl nesting in a makeshift perch made out of a flower pot. Cute. And towels that he'd built for her handicapped frame. It allowed her legs to rest, but for her torso to stay upright. The towels pushed tightly against her breast feathers and held her steady. She looked out into the night, the wind ruffling her beautiful starry pattern. He sat down in her chair and glanced at her. I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to upset you. Just thought, I know. A bird slipped smoothly into his mind. But she didn't preach. You help people. That's what you do. This is different. Feels like you're trying to replace her. I mean, that's a step. She's trying to blame him for this. Carlos looked up in alarm. No! Never! I could never replace Andrea. And we adopted the kids. It wasn't to replace what we lost. It was to give them a home. To have someone to love. To hear laughter in the halls again. To see their smiling faces at breakfast table. To feel their birds. Haley closed her eyes. Do you still think of her? Every day. Not a day goes where I don't think of something she said or did. The amount of time that's passed doesn't matter. It's still here. He touched his head and then reached out. He ran his hand along his wife's feathered body and started to rub his fingers along her. Stiffened at first, then relaxed, her head feathers fluffing. Didn't mean had to stay with us forever. I wanted to give her a place to hide, to feel safe again. We lost family too. Is it safe for our children? I can ask GLaDOS to put a protective ward around our place. I picked up my mic so that I can, like, lean back and not have to worry. Because I'm an old lady and my back hurts, okay? So, hopefully this... I've mastered a new technique for streaming. I feel like I've leveled up. Anyway. I can ask GLaDOS to put up a protective ward around our place. I'm sure she'll do it. He licked his lips and rubbed her feathers some more. Will you at least meet her? I mean, I already planned for her to come round, Haley, so if you don't, then you're in for a big surprise. Oh, Carlos, asking for forgiveness, not permission, really. Haley sighed deeply into his mind. They sat in silence for a while, but eventually she turned her beautiful eyes to him. I'll meet her. I heard the kids. They're excited to the possibility of having a new sister, huh? Carlos chuckled. Yeah, they like a big family. So did Andrea. She fluffed her feathers up a bit, then nodded towards the chair. You're going to have to move so I can change. Carlos stood. His wife stretched her beautiful wings and flapped, bringing her over to the chair. She settled in it awkwardly, her legs still dragging. She bowed her head and started to change. The feather patterns sucked back into her body until a thin layer blanketed her skin. Her frame grew in size, and her legs slipped over the edge of the chair. Her hair fluttered in gold, white, and brown feathers until it changed back to its usual brown colour. Feathers made up her clothing, then shifted into the skirt and pants she'd been wearing. Younger avians couldn't shift with their clothing, but she and Carlos were old enough that they could. She shook her head a little and pushed her hair back as the last of the feather tattoos faded into her body. Carlos bent down next to her and lifted her chin. When she looked up, he kissed her gently and smiled. I love you. I love you too. Yeah! Da-da-da, that was chapter 4! Change. Currently reading. I do this because I like to think if you have the book you could read along. I think that would be it's like a stretch. But yes, that was chapter 4. We get to meet the bird family with much birds. Birds that happen to be in the visions our other bird was having. Much bird. So, we know they're very important. We're also 90% of the way through, so yeah, so problem. These streams are only... I shouldn't worry about stretching this book out. I have one other book after this that they've given me permission to write the first couple of chapters, basically. And then I have 3 other books who have contacted me with interest, but I would very much like to get reading these summaries before I read them to everyone else. Because you never know. You don't know what you're getting into sometimes. Yeah, so I suppose I shouldn't be saving this book, because I'm looking up, and we've only been streaming 45 minutes, and I've done, like, a chapter. And we're 90% of the way through. And I only get 50% of this book. So, I wanted to maybe stretch it, but I'm gonna forget that plan. Bad plan, Bernie. Carry on with the book. GLaDOS arrived at Carlos' past... Freed, bitch! GLaDOS arrived as Carlos passed out pieces of cake to his family. Just in time. Cake time. Carlos! GLaDOS greeted and patted his arm, while the teen hid behind her. He gestured for them to come inside and shut the door. The girl trembled at GLaDOS's shoulder as he followed the Magus towards the table. Her clothing hung off her thin body, her hands tugging anxiously. Tugging, not trugging, there's no R in there. Where did I pick that up from? Tugging anxiously at the hem of her skirt. He yearned to reach out and comfort her, but she didn't know him, so he refrained. Madison and Henry didn't share the same restraint. They jumped out of their chairs and ran to her. Ah! Carlos grunted at them. Manners? The two jerked to a stop and smiled. I'm Henry, I'm Madison, they said at the same time, giggled, and then took turns introducing themselves. The teen offered a nervous smile. Bianca, he said. Henry waved good-naturedly, which Bianca returned. Whoa, your hair is so pretty, Maddie exclaimed, standing on her tiptoes to get a better look. Mama said I can get red stripes too. Carlos and GLaDOS both fought back amused laughter as Bianca looked to the Magus for help. Haley whistled. Kids, come back to the table. Give her some space. And no, Madison, your hair is pretty just the way it is. They dutifully obeyed and sat down. Haley slid 2 more plates across the table to their guests. Will you both join us? GLaDOS smiled. Have I ever said no to your baking, Haley? She touched Bianca's shoulder and took a seat. The teen looked back and forth between Carlos and his family as she sat as close to GLaDOS. But he also noticed her staring at the cake with longing. He cut a hefty slice off for her and slid it over, then did the same for GLaDOS. Go on, my wife makes an amazing cake. He handles most of the other cooking, but the cake is mine, Haley said with a chuckle. Bianca offered a nervous smile. Her fork slid through the moist dessert. Apparently it's not moist. We learned. With ease, before she brought it to her mouth, she made a noise of appreciation as she chewed. I don't have my raisins. Can't do a mouth full thing. Whoa! It's delicious. My sister used to make this on special occasions. She never could make it quite like me. But this is close to it as I've tasted before. Haley nodded. I'm glad you like it. It was Carlos's mother's recipe. Was your family from Mexico? I grew up there until I was 5, Bianca explained, thinking. Then Mum and Dad moved to the States. Said there were better opportunities here for work and healthcare and all that stuff. Sounds like a lie. But Mum still liked to cook traditional recipes. Taste of home, I guess. She shrugged and dug in for another bite. Carlos studied Bianca as she enjoyed the dessert. Despite her compliment, her eyes darted around as if she was expecting someone to pop out of the shadows and attack her. Scared little bird, wasn't she? GLaDOS touched Bianca's shoulder and motioned at the family. Bianca, this is Carlos and his wife Haley, the avians I was telling you about. Carlos is one of the better known cloister fathers in the area. He's the one I usually bring werebirds to help them adjust. Carlos inclined his head. Yes, we wanted to get to know you a bit though. Bianca swallowed her chunk of cake and glanced at GLaDOS. Is it safe for them if I talk about what happened? GLaDOS nodded, and Bianca took a shaky breath. I lived with my sister, Nora. I was set to start college this fall, but then the hunters came. Nora's. And I don't know what to do. She rubbed her neck. I'm tired of running. That's all I've been doing, and I don't know what else. Where else? I don't know who else to turn to. My sister mentioned the Purple Door district, so I came here and Gladys saved me from them. So, yeah. Here I am. Carlos glanced at the water maggot. She saved more than a few parahumans who lost their way. Without her, I don't know what the Purple Door district would really be like. Gladys waved a hand. Oh, stop it. You're making me blush. If I up and vanished, they'd find some other poor soul to replace me, she said. I'm nothing special. This isn't about me. This is about Bianca. She's so good, though, she said, touching the young woman's back. Haley folded her hands on the table. What do you really want, Bianca? What are you hoping for? Honestly, safety. Chance to go back to school and warn my sister. Her lower lip twitched before she calmed herself. I want to know I'm not going to up to a gun too. Haley flinched. Carlos's heart went out to the Gladys had texted him more information, letting him know the girl had been on the run for a few weeks now. Her life couldn't be in more shambles, and he and Haley had a way to help her. Didn't they take that opportunity? He glanced at his wife and she at him. Madison hopped out of her chair and went to Bianca's side. She settled her little hands on the girl's arm, gazing up at the older werebird in sympathy. I'm sorry your sister died. Not nice what those people did. Tears pricked Bianca's eyes. Thank you. She reached for Madison's shoulder, hesitated, and dropped her arm. Gladys has basically done nothing but praise you guys. Carlos beamed at the water maggots. She had a knack for finding the good in people. He wished she inspired that in the hunters too. Haley watched me carefully beside their daughter. What school did you get into? The Chicago Institute of Art, Bianca said. I was going there for painting and then, well, all this happened. Henry jumped up. I like to draw too. Before Carlos could stop him, his son scampered off to his room. He returned with an art pad in hand and shoved it in Bianca's face. See? I draw birds! Haley held out a hand. Henry, honey, come here. Remember, I told you to ask people to look at your art before you get it. Sweet baby. Sweet, sweet baby. Protect. Henry blushed and sheepishly walked to his mother's side. Sorry, Mama. Haley kissed his head. Bianca, meanwhile, flipped through the pages of the art pad. She looked at the drawings with a critical eye. Carlos worried about her reaction. He didn't want her to crush his son's dreams, but his worries were unfounded. As she lowered her pad, a big smile covering her face. These are awesome! You're going to be a great artist one day if you keep this up. Ah. Henry beamed and looked like he just floated up to cloud 9. He hopped up and down on his heels. Did you hear that? She likes my art. She really likes it. He whirled back towards her. What do you like to draw? Anything, I guess. I just close my eyes and see an image in my head. It doesn't always come to me, but sometimes I get this strong feeling that I need to paint and create scenes. Some I don't understand. Some are just from what I expect to see in my daily life. Can you teach me? Bianca opened and shut her mouth, not knowing how to answer. Haley rescued her. I think that would be a nice idea, she said. Ah, she's earned Mother's approval. Bianca, how would you like to give Henry art lessons? While Gladys is working during the day, you can come here and show Henry how to draw. We can get to know one another a little better. Carlos couldn't hide the pride from his face. His wife, who one moment had been so resistant to the idea of welcoming someone else into their home, actually offered to have Bianca come visit them. That was a step in the right direction. Haley's owl brushed his mind, appearing beside his golden eagle. Don't get too excited. Consider it a trial run for her. Thank you for giving her a chance. Haley sighed mentally and brought her bird back into her. Bianca turned a little red with embarrassment. I'm not exactly a professional, but I'd be happy to show him. You got into the Chicago Institute of Art, Haley replied. I think that says you have talent. Carlos smiled. I'll make some calls and see what I can do about getting you to school. I don't have money, Bianca said. My parents and sister gone. He waved his hand. I can give you a job at my restaurant. You can't serve alcohol, but you can take orders and help pass out food. It's not much, but it would help you. Bianca stared at him in shock. Seriously, you two don't even know me. Carlos jerked a thumb towards Gladys. She vouches for you, and that much means a lot. It's hard to hide much from avian. True, Bianca agreed. She looked around the room at everyone, her eyes lighting up. If you'll have me, then yes. Oh my god, yes. She laughed, even as tears ran down her cheeks. Thank you. Carlos gently sent his bird inside of her mind to offer comfort and security. He jolted in surprise when he found a red-throated caracara, a Mexican bird. Should we go look up pictures of a caracara as well? 1 minute. I'll find it for you. Cara. I did this when I started reading this as well. I really wanted to know what a caracara actually looked like. Here we go. Caracara! They are, apparently. Quite the beak about it. I'd say their throat is red, but their face is a little red. Tested caracara. Oh, happy caracara. This is probably what they were like. What her and her sister were like before her sister died. Oh, you can't see where I'm pointing, but you can see the little thing kind of. This one. I forgot I took the mouse off. Oh, well, yeah, but those are the caracara birds. That's what her bird looks like. His eagle ruffled his feathers, then stepped towards her. The caracara hesitated at the sight of his bigger frame, but she slowly edged closer and cocked her head. Once she was at his side, Carlos preened her neck feathers. He hesitated before nibbling on new blood feathers of his coming in. Carlos opened his eyes and looked at her. Her expression softened, and he was filled with an overwhelming desire to protect her. She might not be his daughter by blood, but she could definitely be family. Thank you, Bianca said, for giving me a chance. Haley's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Hopefully this will work out for all of us. Carlos squeezed Haley's hand tightly and rubbed his thumb along her skin. He saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She was trying to let go of the demons of the past. She was trying, but letting go of the demons of the past wasn't so easy. This trial would be as much for Haley as Bianca. Aww, those kids are so sweet though. Absolute babies. Protect at all costs. I remember like the kids being like so happy with it. I draw too! Runs off to get all the art, yes. Aw, it's so cute. It's bro. Sweet fictional kids that you don't actually have to listen to cry. and that are just sweeties. That is it. No devils. Oh, so we're going over to Trish for this chapter. First, I need to check my currently reading. So Trish, for those of you who don't remember, is the vampire that was bugging Carlos in the guacamole grill, who got kicked out and got her blood bag taken from her because she was being a dumbass. That he apparently helped get off the street and into her coven, which is apparently what they're calling the vampire oysters. Packs, whatever you want to call it. Which is weird because they didn't use that word for the witches. But hey ho, that's semantics. So, this is what she was up to after getting kicked out. The cool night exuded calm, without a cloud in the sky to disrupt the peace. Trish felt anything but calm as she stormed away from the guacamole grill. The Purple Door districts had been created so parahumans could be themselves, free from the constraints of human society, able to reveal their true natures and appearances. They existed as they had for centuries, with their own laws and traditions. Two wolves could fight for their mate without facing assault and battery charges. Fae could walk around the street with their wings on full display. A vampire could, supposedly, bring her prey and feed quietly in the corner of a restaurant. Itchy, that's not what you were doing. That doesn't mean you... Just because you got freedom of doing stuff doesn't mean you're free from consequences. If Gladys hadn't been there, Trish would have made it painfully clear to Carlos why crossing vampires could be deadly. But even she knew not to face off against him. She gently grumbled to herself as she stalked down the street, her heeled boots clicking on the pavement. People moved out of her way quickly, sensing her. Trish praised herself for her intimidation tactics, though at the same time she wanted to snag one of them, suck him dry. Just to alleviate her anger, she already lost a blood bag that night, thanks to both Gladys and that damn avian. What she wouldn't give to the pet could her venom. But her venom could kill Carlos. But even if Gladys survived the transition to vampire, she didn't deserve the power that came with it. She shoved her hand into her pockets of her trench coat and lifted her head to the moonlight. It was a relief to be out at night and not having to worry about rubbing on sunscreen a la vampire. Thank the Night Father, someone had come up with that stuff. It made it easier for vampires to roam around without being obvious to what they were. No more hiding their skin under wrapping scarves, shawls, hats and the like. That's a long list. Trish hopped the street and headed towards the Violet Tower. A replica of the Violet Hour, a human bar. Is it a famous human bar? Did I know the name? I'm gonna Google that as well. We're on a Google spree today. We're gonna learn the Violet Hour. Chicago. Oh, it is! It is a famous, somewhat famous establishment. Or it's also a play, apparently. The Violet Hour. I won't show you this one because this feels like it would be an advert if I did. About. Ah, it is an exposition. That's an art one. That's not even what I'm looking for. Aha, the Violet Hour. Cocktails and the like. Cocktail. Naruhodo. Oh, and you can do private events. I see. It is very high class by the looks of it. Yes, does look like somewhere you'd get vampires, that's for sure. Nice. Very cool. This one more or less screamed vampire-friendly. The single light over the front door gleamed purple and bore a black upside-down triangle mark in the glass to indicate vampire safe. Trish snorted to herself, wondering just how many people thought the Illuminati governed this place instead. Yes, 100%. There is whole internet forums about that in this universe, most definitely. She took off her long leather coat at the door, revealing a sensual black dress beneath it. She'd pulled it up since leaving her job at the bank to show off her legs, and had taken off the pantyhose and her cardigan, exposing the sheer fabric over her chest. Black velvet coiled in serpentine patterns over the thin fabric, stopping just above her breasts. The dress revealed just enough to tease the eye. She walked inside and surveyed the wooden wall. They reminded her of the inside of a beer barrel, rich-coloured wood that breathed tangy alcohol fumes into the air. Plush seats with violet cushions sat beside the tables, accented with vases of fresh flowers. A fireplace warmed the room, including the two elegant vampires sitting. Trish smiled at her coven brethren, dark-skinned man with dreads that hung down to his shoulders with a refined posture. His eyes gleamed chocolate brown, but could turn as red as Trish's when he desired. He wore pressed pants, a white shirt, deep green tie, and a jacket that showed off his broad shoulders. A pale-skinned German woman with golden hair that flowed in waves against her sharp cheeks sat beside him. A midnight blue dress hugged her curvaceous body and matched her icy eyes. Her perfectly manicured French tips, which could easily be turned into, drummed against her navy handbag. I like that we have, 1 second. We have mention of some accessories, because when you come in for fashion, accessories are also important. I don't know why you're expected to go and parley with the werewolves. Prowler, the blonde vampire, said. Plenty of others are going to be present for the negotiation. You're needed here, with the coven. Joseph asked for me specifically. Saul, the other vampire, remarked. And we don't say no to Joseph. I'll be back in a week, Prowler. Don't worry yourself overly much. He lifted a crystal glass to his lips and sipped a deep. It stained his mouth until he licked it off, sharp fangs standing out in bright contrast to his dark skin. If you're sure, Prowler remarked. She raised her glass until her sharp eyes caught sight of Trish. She paused and puffed a dramatic sigh before putting her glass down. Trish! Well, at least you're dressed appropriately this time. Prowler screams bitch from the moment she's brought in, doesn't she? Oh, lordy. Trish coloured and smoothed down her dress. Coloured her dress? Reading that right? I don't know. The first time she'd followed them into the bar, she'd been forced out by a bouncer. Not properly dressed according to house rules. Stupid rules in her opinion. But her brethren certainly liked to put on a show. She was still learning that, though. Her human ways clung to her like a parasite. I took note of the issue last time, Trish replied. She walked over to an empty chair and sat down. Prowler curled her lips in disdain, but Saul inclined his head welcomingly. Good evening, he said. Are you adjusting better to your new life? Trish nodded and glanced at her hands. They were pale compared to the sun and blood-kissed hands she remembered. But she was adjusting to her new appearance, amongst other things. Craving for blood, the sense of power flowing through veins. Yeah. Though I'm still figuring out where I'm welcome. Growler sighed. It's not that difficult. The Bubble Door District is marked with symbols to help you know. If you see an upside down triangle, it's vampire friendly. Trish drawled. And if there's no symbol but the door or something around the place is purple, then it's welcome to all parakeets. So what's the trouble then? Frowler asked. Or are you incapable of following a simple rules, Bittenborn? The insult made Trish's skin. Frowler, Saul gave her a pointed look and lifted his hand to Trish. What can we do to help? Trish fiddled with a marble coaster on the table next to her. It's just this restaurant. The Guacamole Grill. The owner is an E. Keeps giving me problems. And then the Violet Marshal showed up today, and she made me leave without my blood bag. I wasn't doing anything. You were just being a giant bitch. I was having a bit of fun with him and the werewolves and... Werewolves! Growler hissed and flexed her fingers to claws. How many times have we told you not to associate with the werewolves? Your powers can't control them well, not when you're so young. And the Alpha here does not take kindly to vampires toying with his property. You'll get the Coven in trouble again. Growler scoffed and grabbed her glass. Why can't you be like the other new vampires? Calm, thoughtful, resilient. Has there been a single night in this town that you haven't caused trouble? The scorn in her tone tasted like rotten fruit. Trish's stomach twisted with shame and anger. Yeah, like he fucking should. What did Frowler know? What did this older vampire know? How dare she? She'd been born a vampire and lived and breathed the culture. It's almost like she does know better because of that, and you should fucking learn. I'm mad and ignorant, so I won't listen to this person who is admittedly a bit of a bitch, but at least knows what she's on about. Oh, Trish. Oh, Trisha. Trish had only been one for a little over a year. She'd just broken free of her sire before she reached the Purple Door District. It wasn't her fault he'd done a poor job at training her. Listen to the people who tried to teach you! She hadn't asked to be picked up off the street by a vampire. Why he'd chosen her, she didn't know. She'd been heading home from the movies with friends when she'd been attacked. Every single one of her friends had died. But the man who had grabbed her had spared her. Instead of killing her, he changed her, turning her into the vampire she was today. He'd kept her caged up to control her bloodlust. And for months, she'd more or less been his slave, catering to his needs, offering herself and her blood to him. Yeah, okay, fair enough. However, in the immortal world of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, cool murder, still murder. He grew tired of her once he brought another little plaything. It had given her enough distraction to escape. She could feed without him. And she didn't feel the pull to him any longer. Her current coven had found and taken care of her thanks to a tip from Gladys. But that was where the Mags' usefulness. Oh, she's so ungrateful. You've been through so much shit. I get it, but good lord. And pleasantry. Between the shit she's giving Carlos and the shit she's giving Gladys, like, goddamn. Goddamn, Trisha. That needs to be a new phrase for whenever she does something bad. That is, goddamn, Trisha is going to be our new thing. Trish firmly believed that Gladys had been if Gladys had her way, she would wipe out every vampire with a mile radius. Trisha! Honestly! What in the world told you that? Your coven is fine with her. Why aren't you? Anyway, well, Prowler hissed, breaking Trish from her thoughts. Trish cleared her throat. I don't always cause problems. I'm still learning, Prowler. I just need the right teacher. Saul has been your mentor, Prowler snapped. He's wasted enough time on a novice like you. If you can't learn our ways, then maybe you aren't meant to be a vampire. And maybe you don't belong in our coven. We all have to pull our weight. She trailed her sharp nail around the rim of her glass. What have you done? Prowler's words slapped Trish in the face. As they should! Her cheeks burned crimson as she glanced away. I'm trying, she mumbled. Do speak up, she said in an voice. Honestly, Joseph has to be more careful about the children he brings into the coven. You'll give us a bad name, dear. Especially if you keep catching the ire of Gladys. Establishments will start barring us, and we can't have that now, can we? She looked sharply at Saul. What can we do about this? No, if even her coven's sick of her shit. Trish bristled. I'm sitting right here. You could talk to me, or, Night Father forbid, train me. They're trying! Prowler tossed her hand in the air, her bracelets jingling on her thin wrist. We've tried. It's not our fault you won't listen. Trish looked at Saul pleadingly. Saul? The vampire steepled his fingers on his knee and looked Trish up and down. Going away for a business meeting, so I can't be the one to help you. But I think you should go ask Joseph and ask for another mentor. Prowler is right. You're bringing trouble to the coven. The avian father has already complained, and if he does so again, we may be banned from his restaurant and side of town. I promise you, neither Joseph nor your vampire brethren will take too kindly to that development. She's such a dumbass! Trish ducked her head and reprimanded and looked sad. Being scolded by Fraldale was expected, but she hated disappointing Saul. A wise and generous man, any young vampire would be lucky to have him as a mentor, so why don't you fucking listen to him? Eh, bitch? Eh? And what do I do? Prowler cut him before Saul could speak. Do us a favor and leave. Prowler, be kind. I am being kind. If she can't cut it as a vampire, then Joseph will have no choice but to... Prowler. Saul didn't shout, but a dark tone echoed in his voice, warning her. Prowler wisely fell silent and sipped her drink. Trish froze. No one had said anything about their coven duke coming down on her if she had trouble adjusting. It wasn't her fault. Of course it's not. Of course it's not. Her vampire instincts were overpowering and hard to ignore. I don't want to leave. Then grow up, child, Prowler said. You're no use to us the way you are now. Trish shoved herself to her feet angrily, hitting the table that held Saul's drink. Fine crystal shattered on the marble top and spilled red liquid all over the white stone floor. Prowler snarled in displeasure while Saul sighed. Trish, wait, he said. Trish ignored him and stalked towards the door, throwing her black trench coat around her shoulders, and with a loud whoosh. She heard Fowler make some scathing remarks in the background, but Trish ignored her. She jerked the door open and stepped out into the night, the cool breeze pulling the heat from her cheeks. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she tried to calm her pounding heart. Once again, I did a wink. Contrary to most people's beliefs, and originally her own naivete, vampires did indeed have beating hearts and flowing blood. They weren't dead. Their bodies were predispositioned to being sensitive to sunlight, some burning and blistering depending on sensitivity and the lotion they used. Their bodies crave blood as well as a primary food source, and what better way to feed than with their sharp fangs? A venom sac behind their left fang, excreted a euphoric sedative into their prey during feeding. In high enough quantities, it could turn a human into a vampire or kill a lichen. Vampires couldn't change lichens, only hurt them, but they could transform witches and Maggie, though it usually meant that the ether touch lost their ability to use magic. Of course, all of this Trish had to learn while trying to adjust to her own cravings. She clenched her hands into fists, yearning to put one through a wall. Her eyes darted back and forth, searching for the next blood bag that she could feast on and temper her rage. A hand caught her wrist and jerked her into an alleyway. She snarled, extending her sharp nails and fangs. She swung out, but the person who'd grabbed her ducked and shoved her against the wall. Her assailant pressed an arm across her throat, and the other held her wrist up near her face. Easy, Trish. You almost gave me a face full. Trish calmed down as the familiar face of one of her coven brothers broke through the red. He stood over her with a handsome face and dashing good looks. His eyes flickered red like hers to show familiarity in a time of stress rather than to betray his hunger. His brown hair swept around his face, his lips pulled back into a wide, overly pearly one. His lips pulled back in a wide smile over pearly white teeth. You think, realistically, the vampire's teeth would be more pink? Because in the way that the British stereotype is yellow teeth due to the fact that we drink a lot of tea, would a vampire's teeth get stained pink because they drink a lot of blood? Food for thought. Trish sighed, letting the claws and the fangs slip back beneath her skin. Sorry, Gavin. Sorry, Gav. Bro. Gav. Gavin whistled as he released her. He hadn't hurt her, but she rubbed her throat anyway. Oh, sorry, my throat. My throat's just decided not play ball. But that's okay. I think we should be able to get through this anyway. Let's carry on. You looked like you looked on a warpath, girl. Never good for that to happen when you need to hunt. He braced his hands behind his head and leant back on his heel. You're looking for a bite? I can help you out. I don't know if that's what I need, Trish confessed. She rolled her eyes. Besides, even if I do go hunting, I'm pretty sure Fowler will point out how I do it wrong. Oh, Fowler again, eh? Gavin snorted loudly. That bitch has a stick up her ass a mile long. I bet she was giving orders the moment she popped her head out of the womb. He cocked his head and reached out to cup her cheek. What's she done this time? Aside from crush the hopes and children? Threatened to turn me over to Joseph if I don't shape up. She sank against the wall and folded her arms over her belly. Couldn't imagine getting kicked out. Not now. She'd suffered enough already. And she didn't know how to find another coven. It had been a fluke finding this one. And even then, Joseph had been reluctant to take her in. He'd wanted to make certain she didn't have connection to neighbouring covens that could bring danger to his own. She'd decided not to mention that she'd escaped her sire. No one had seen sight of him since her departure, and she hoped to keep it that way. Gavin made a face. Really? He's not Miss Perfect all the time either. Well, according to her, I'm a complete screw-up. It shot back. She looked up at the night sky, the moon and stars, partially hidden behind light pollution. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, Gavin. How about being a giant bitch? I thought we were superior. I mean, there's your problem. I thought we were superior. That's exactly your problem, Trish. You're not above anyone. You just happen to suck blood. I thought we were supposed to be running this city. Oh, I thought I was so much better than everyone else. But turns out I too am a plebeian. Ha! What vampire have you been speaking to? He flopped against the wall next to her and bumped her with his hip. Back in the day, vampires thought they should rule everything once they escaped servitude to the werewolves. Now that's also an interesting thing, because that's usually potentially the other way around in a lot of things. Obviously in a lot of fantasy, vampires and werewolves usually don't get along. But to have one potentially enslaved to the other a long time ago, that puts things in interesting positions, politically. That is. Not sure just how much you know about our history, but we got stuck as slaves to those lichens. He made a face. Grandma used to tell me all about it. She didn't live during that time, but she knew the stories, and I heard it every time a wolf did something reckless in the news. Anyway, we wanted to make something of ourselves, but we went about it slowly. Found freedom, rose in the ranks, got a hold of businesses with a lot of money, and worked well with the help of persuasion. Lawyers, judges, Trish remarked. Gavin pointed a finger at her. Bingo! But we aren't supposed to be high and mighty. Over the werewolves, sure. But we are cautious. That's why Frowler gets all pissy. He thinks we have to have all the proper decorum. She forgets how strong we really are. We're not as breakable as the lichens made us out to be. Trish nodded, relieved to have someone willing to teach her and be on her side. Though Gavin did like to feed more than the average vampire, and he carelessly left dead bodies behind if he got a little too inebriated. He also enjoyed sleeping with the blood bag before feeding off him or her. Okay. Maybe not the best. She has enough self-awareness to realise Gavin is a bad example, but does want to follow that example. Trisha! God damn it, Trisha! You're terrible. Terrible! Gavin draped his arm around her shoulders suddenly and shook her lightly. Oh, don't let Frowler boil your blood. Come on, let's get something to eat and unwind a bit. How could she say no to that? And his smile? Trish grinned back and leaned against him as he guided her out of the alleyway onto the street. They walked in a synchronized step, Trish adoring the lights which came overhead. Christmas wasn't for nearly 2 months. Oh, I'm reading this at about the right time then. But Chicago decorated early. The distant ding of a bell announced storefront Santas collecting for the Salvation Army. Trish nuzzled her cheek into Gavin's warm shoulder for comfort, the scent of his spice cologne filling her nose. He lifted an eyebrow at her and brushed her hair delicately with his finger. "What's up, little bat?" he asked. My family and I used to walk and scope out the lights. My big brother made hot chocolate, and we'd drive around town too, just to find the most decked out house. Nice to see. Yeah, I always liked that too, Evan said. Glanced down at her, a slow smile. No one says you can't do that with your coven members. I know a couple of us who even like to go caroling. Just the images. Oh yes, the vampires going caroling. Seriously? What? Gavin gave a look of indignant. Not like we're going to burst into flames singing about God or something. Be a pretty piss poor way to build a flock if your people die when you say your name. He cleared his throat and started to belt out, "Away in a manger, no crib or a bed, a little Lord Jesus." Ah! He flapped against her, moaning and creating a scene in front of the humans. A few sent disconcerted looks their way, but Trish waved them off and caught Gavin. "Oh my god, stop!" Trish complained, laughing. "See?" Gavin chortled. "You didn't burst into flames either." Trish punched him in the shoulder. Okay. I'd like that. But you need to stop singing. Oh, come on. I'm not that bad. I did once have a BA in music. In another life. I have a BA in music too. He kissed her temple affectionately and guided them along. Trish relaxed in embrace. Maybe she needed to hang out with him more. At least he didn't give a shit for being herself. Or how she acted. Saul sometimes said Gavin, too, walked a fine line between being in and out of the coven. But somehow, they still liked and respected him. Most of the time. He guided her down another alley and squeezed her hand. Here. Trish shrank back into the shadows, drawing on her natural fire gifts to blend in. She heard Gavin speak to someone nearby and waited to pounce. But he didn't drag some hapless person into the alley. He guided her by the hand, speaking soothingly to her as she smiled like a... "Come out, Trish," agreed to accompany us for the night. Trish appeared and the woman looked at her with a dazed expression on her face. Gavin pulled her rainbow ombre hair to the side and exposed her neck. Her heartbeat pulsed through her veins, the blood rushing like an ocean. Trish's gums itched, and she brought her fangs out, moving closer to the woman. "Go easy," Gavin warned. "She's too pretty to kill." "Rainbow ombre hair, yeah, fair dues." Trish snorted, but recentered herself nonetheless. Her fangs pricked the woman's fragile flesh, causing 2 crimson drops to blossom through the holes. How sweet the smell. How tempting. Trish sank her teeth. The woman's vein started to suck. Gavin moved to the other side, lifted the woman's hair up, and bit on her shoulder. The warm blood filled her mouth, tingled her sense. He moaned against the woman's flesh, reveling in taste. He would never grow tired. The bags just weren't the same, and synthetic blood was even less desirable. No, if vampirism was her destiny, then she would... Something small hit the back of her neck, but the poison inside of it struck her like a bus. It burned her skin and blood worse than a high noon sun. Trish jerked away from the woman with a cry of pain. There were certain herb mixtures that all Lycan's magic users and vampires were allergic to, and apparently someone had found out hers. I see, so there is a bane for every variety of parahuman. I wonder what the Batbane, probably Batbane. I'm calling it Batbane. She fell back against the wall, dazed, sick to her stomach. Gavin staggered away as well, dropping the woman to the ground. His teeth had created a deep gouge in her flesh by mistake, leaving their little lamb to bleed sacrificially on the cold concrete ground. He shook his head and stumbled over towards Trish. Little bat? He slurred. She tried to support him, but her legs wobbled beneath her. She wrapped her arms around him and looked over his shoulder as two men approached. "We only need one," the bearded man said. Trish blinked as the second man pulled a gun with a silencer out of his holster. He pointed it. Trish barely had a second to tense before a bullet quietly entered the back of Gavin's head. "Gavin!" she rasped. He collapsed in her arms, eyes still open. She slumped down with him, sobbing, "No, no." But her grief came to an abrupt halt as a boot connected her face. I'm still mad at her because she's still a terrible person who does not know what consequences are. But that's still pretty shitty. Like, the one person she's connected to just gets fucking murdered in front of her. In a murder. And then she gets booted. Booted! It's bad, bro. Very bad. Poor vampire. But also... No, she didn't deserve this. No one really deserves to die. She just needs to bloody learn. But then what do I know about being a vampire? I'm super judgy about this. Anyway, we are in chapter 7. But I think I'm going to call it there because my throat is not happy today. Not a happy bun. And also a little tired. But we're on 26%, so we're probably only going to get about 2 more streams out of this book. So I'm going to have to get a bit faster on reading some stuff so that I can judge whether I want to talk about them on stream. If anyone has any suggestions, feel free to comment them. Please keep in mind that I will need permission for these books. So if you like a book and you want to suggest it, keep in mind that, I don't know, publishers might not give me permission. Most of these ones that I picked I either know the author via their social medias, or I've literally posted on things like Goodreads stuff and gone like, hey, any indie authors want this? So it's been the authors that have come to me for it. But yeah, I hope you liked my new background. Let's have a look at it. Where's my... This one. Da-da-da! I'll try to find my book. I don't know where it's gone. I can only assume it's gone somewhere in here. Thank you very much for coming. I hope you enjoyed. I will be back next Sunday for more. And we will find out what happened to Trish in this warehouse. But as the game begins, I guess. Exciting. I really do. It's got some really cool stuff going on. I like that we have vampires that are alive. They're not dead people. They're just doing their best. It's just that their nature is a little unsavory compared to a lot of others. Yeah, it's really interesting. And I hope you would like to read the whole book. Link is in the description. Other than that, I will be back next Sunday with this book. For the rest of the week's streams next week, I will be going back to Sonic. I gave myself a little bit of a break this week because I was, as I said last week, it's getting a little burnt out. I do love Sonic and I wanted to play more, but I needed to give myself a stream break. However, I have had a lovely break. I've played a lot of Pokemon. I even had some days off actual work, so it's been good. And I feel like I can get back to Sonic. Start running around that third island, getting all the spanners and helping Tails. Will be great. Anyway, I will see you tomorrow for Sonic. Until then, I had fun. I hope you had fun. This has been Brandy Rose Smith live from the Forbidden Library. Goodbye.